Alright, hello everyone. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial that I've put off for far too long. We're going to be going over how to set up world drops in two different ways. This gives you the ability to drop props and lock them in world space. So you can put things down on tables, leave them in the air, stab your friends and leave the knife in. We're going to be doing two different ways. The first one will be world dropping a separate model. So this is the way most people would do it. You have another model altogether that's separate from your avatar and your armature, and you put that on there, constraints around or whatever. We'll be world dropping that. The other way we will be doing it is by world dropping an item that is attached to your armature and is part of your mesh. That way is slightly more complicated, but honestly, they're both pretty easy. So let's get started. First of all, what we're going to do is right click on your avatar, create empty, and just because it's the way that I do it, I'm going to name this world target. This world target, you want to make sure that it is on your main hierarchy and that it is completely zeroed out position, zero out rotation, scale is default, whatever you do, normally 1, 1, 1, 1. That you don't want to move. This you want to make sure is zeroed. If you have issues, 9 out of 10 times, it's usually to do with this. And then other than the world target, the only other thing you need is a couple nested game objects to hold your prop. So first we'll take this and we'll call it staff world. Or again, all of these you kind of want to make sure they're zeroed out to start with, just makes life a little easier. Underneath that, we'll call that staff holder. And then underneath that one, you can drop in your prop. So the first thing you want to set up is on the prop world, or let's get staff world. You want to add a position constraint and a rotation constraint. Before you do anything with those, make sure you open up the constraint settings, tick the little lockbox. This is very important. You want these locked in the default position before you start doing anything. If they're not locked, they can cause issues with your world dropped object kind of sliding around in space. And after that, you just want to add a source to both of them, and that source is going to be that world target you created. And then we're going to tick is active. We don't use the activate button. It causes issues half the time. Is active will steer you right every time. And then we will type in the values. Position constraint, the weight is 0.5, and then it's a -1 for your source. For the rotation constraint, weight stays at 1, and the source goes to -0.5. That's your world drop basically set up there. The other thing we're going to want to do is your staff holder. We're going to use this to pair and constraint around to your different places, like your hand, your hip, whatever the case. So same idea, we're going to put that on. We're just going to lock it, and then we can create some sources for this. So I am just going to throw this. We'll just give it an easy one. I'll put it on my right hand, on my right wrist, empty. Target. Plug that in, and is active. So then I can adjust that target around however I want. I'm not too concerned about how pretty it is for the tutorial. Just showing you guys function over anything. So there's our staff. So that is your basic setup of what you need to world drop a separate object. Of course, for your parent constraint, you can add more sources. You could add another source as an object under your chest. Good. And you could have these, animations switching the sources between the different places on your armature, depending on what you want to do. You can go ham, you can parent all you want. There's no limit to how many different sources you have here where you're moving around and everything. The only thing that is important is that you have this kind of nested setup and that your position and rotation constraints are set up like this as the parent object. Okay, now that we have our constraints all set up and our targets for putting our prop on our back and on our hand, we're going to go over and do some animations. This is pretty easy. You only need a couple animations for this basic setup. So we're going to do an animation. This is going to be, I'll call it staff chest. Then I'm just going to duplicate that for another one. We'll call it staff hand. They're going to control our position of our staff. Now we're going to make another animation. And then we'll call that staff drop. Called staff hold. Name these whatever you want. I'm just going to name them for myself right now. Duplicate our model, hide the one that is our good one, and we'll just drag our animations onto the new one. You're going to go over your animation tab, and for your controlling where your position is, it's pretty easy. All we're going to do is record our sources of our parent constraint. So this one's for the chest. So I want to make sure I record the staff target location. So I just have to change that number and then I'll put it back to 0. And then same thing with chest. I'll change it and put it back to 1. So now that animation is targeting my chest. And then we'll do the same thing for hand. I'll switch these numbers over. And that one will tell it's in the hand. And we'll go over and record for the world drop. This is a little bit more complicated by a fraction. The thing we want to do to get this world drop to work is we want to animate the property of the parent constraint that is active. We want to be turning that on and off to drop this in the world and pick it back up. The only issue with animating it is if you go and you record and you click is active, it doesn't record by default. So easy fix, you just go down, add property, go to the game object that the parent constraint is on, open up the parent constraint itself. The first thing is active, so press the little plus button and you add it. When you do this, it will add another keyframe at 1 second. You want to get rid of this, you don't need it. If you don't get rid of this or you don't change it, it will cause you issues. So make sure that you delete that keyframe and you just have your keyframe on the first thought. Now this is going to be our drop, so we want to turn the is active off. And I'm just going to copy that, go over to the staff hold, paste it in, and we want that one to turn it back on. Again, make sure you don't have any extra keyframes in there. And we can get rid of this guy because we don't need him. Get rid of the animator creates. Then we're going to come over. We're going to need, for this setup at least, I'm going to use 2 bools. One of them is going to be staff position. The other one will be staff drop. FX layer for your model, the parameters tab, and you'll want to add in both of those parameters as bools. I just copy and paste them from my parameter menu, that way I make sure I don't spell anything wrong. Come over, you're going to create a new layer for yourself, name whatever you want. This is going to be the layer that controls the position. Make sure you weight your layer up. Then we're going to have this set up so staff chest is the default. Oh no, not staff drop. That's wrong. Staff chest is default. And staff hand is going to be what we'll just back and forth from. Create two quick things. We'll give that staff position equals true. These are just the settings I use for my transitions. Do whatever you normally do. We're going to do staff position equals false to go back. And just because VRChat, we'll make sure right defaults are off on that. So now when staff position true, we'll go to hand, staff position false, we'll go back to chest. And we're going to want to do another layer that's below that, technically. We'll call that staff drop. Again, make sure you weight that up. And then we're going to do the same thing, but with the animations for the is active with the parent constraint. So by default, we want the parent constraint on. So we'll do staff hold. And then we'll do staff drop will be the one we transition into. Does the same setup. We're just going to use our staff drop parameter instead. Is true goes into the drop. Is false comes back out of this. Now the important thing to remember when doing this, we'll turn right defaults off. Important thing to remember when doing this, the way Unity kind of calculates layers and VRChat does, starts as a base layer and works its way up. So you always want the layer that's controlling like the position of your prop. You can have, tons of positions in here, change all around your body and stuff like that. You want that technically in this above your drop. You could have all of the different positions you want in here. You can put it to your hands, your feet, wherever. And then as long as your is active animation, the turn the parent constraint off is the next one below that. It will turn it off no matter where you have a position on your body. So you just want to make sure you're moving around your thing is first, drop is second. And then we are just going to, and then we got to set up toggles, which I already did. So we're just going to, you can set up your controls any way you want. You can set them up to hand toggles, whatever. I'm just going to do some simple toggle buttons just to show for the tutorial. I have a staff hand toggle that's going to toggle the position, and then a staff world toggle that will toggle the drop. You can drop wherever I want and put it back up. Then you just upload your avatar. Of course, make sure all of this is plugged into your avatar scripter and stuff. Alright, now that we have our avatar uploaded, we can go in and just test to make sure things work the way you want. So we got staff hand. That puts it in our hand here. And walk around. We turn that off, go back to our back. And then we have staff world. Turn that on. It drops in the world. Then we can do the same thing. We can turn that off, we go back to our hand, back to there. Put that in our hand. And then drop it. Then even if we turn that off, go back over and be like, go back to our back. But there you go. Your basic setup for a world drop for a separate object. Alright, so this setup requires slightly more effort. It definitely requires the use of Blender, but I'm assuming if you're doing this, you know some basics. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be world dropping an object that is part of our mesh and part of our basic armature. So in our case, this is going to be the gun I have down here. This is part of my main body armature, and it is part of my main mesh. So this is good for optimization and whatnot. You can have this on your main atlas and everything. And, just it's a good way to keep track of things. It's pretty easy to set up, all things considered. I won't go into, detail of how to do Blender or anything like that. I'll just assume that you are to the stage where you have your object in and everything. So the only specifics that you need is you're going to want 2 bones that are controlling your object. One of those bones is going to be the main bone that has the weight to the object. In my case, I believe I named this gun. And that one has all the weight. You can have, of course, more bones or whatever. You just want that one kind of root bone for the physical object itself. The other bone is going to have weight to nothing, but your object is going to be parented to that kind of root bone. And then that root bone you want parented to your skeleton. It can be on any part. I just personally set everything up I root it to my hips. Just because that way it's kind of on the center of my armature. I can move it wherever I want, no problems. But there's no specifics for it. The only thing that you need to make sure you have is a root bone for your object, and then the bone that actually is weighted and controls your object. Once you have that set up, just bring it over to Unity and we'll show you the setup over there. Okay, so back over to Unity, we can see, as you've seen earlier, that we have our gun between our feet. If we go into our armature, let's spawn for now, you'll see I have my gun world, which is what is our root. This is the one that does not have any weights, but the object's parented to, and then it is parented to our hips. And then the child of that is our gun prop itself. This is the one that has all the weight and everything. So this will be basically the exact same setup as the separate object, just with slightly different values at the end of it. So of course, we have our world target all zeroed out. Then we're going to go to our root, the one that is the root of the prop and is parent to our armature. Same thing as last time, we're going to add a position constraint and a rotation constraint. I'm going to open up the constraint settings. We'll lock those right now. Add a source to both those, and we're going to use our world target that's all zeroed out as our source. Then we're going to put in our values. Now these values are the ones that I found work for me. I've used them on multiple armatures and different avatars and everything. They're not the only values that work, they just happen to be the ones that I've found so far. So for position, our weight is going to be at 1. And then our source is going to be at 1e minus 0.6. I know that's a math expression for a number. I don't know. This is just what it ends up being. For our rotation constraint, our weight's going to be again at 1, and our source is going to be at -1. Now we can just tick is active. It's active. Your object might move a little bit. Don't worry too much about that. As long as you had locked your stuff beforehand, you should be fine. And then we're going to go over to our gun prop, and we're going to put a parent constraint on this one. Again, I'm just going to lock off the bat. Add source. I'll do 2 sources again. Show you the same way we did the staff of moving it around. I'm going to add a source to, I'm going to go to my right leg, and empty, let's call that hip target. That one of our sources. Oh yeah, make sure you turn your parent constraint to is active on. Okay. I'm just gonna crudely put it in to its holster. Not too concerned what looks for this. And we'll go and we'll use the left hand this time. And target, yes. Source over, look at that, grab that target, move it around however we want. I totally know how guns work, I swear. No, good enough for this. I'm just gonna put that back to hip. I have that as our default spot. And there you go. You've set up your basic stuff for an armature world draw. We'll go through the animations again. I will say they are exactly like the animations for the separate prop, or separate object drop. But we'll just do it because why not? So we'll call this gun hip. Duplicate that. Gun hand. This isn't everything anyways. Gun drop. That's for I'm gonna do it for a world drop. Gun hold. There we go. Duplicate our avatar. Take our animation clips, let's throw those on there. Go to our animation window. And then we can start doing those. So gun hand, again, it's going to be the same setup as last time. To animate our sources. So that's the gun hand. Gun hip. Change those. So there you go. Our gun drop, we have the same problem where we need to animate turning is active off, but that does not animate by itself, or it doesn't record by itself. So we got to go in. This time go to the armature, hips, gun world, gun prop, find the parent constraint, go active, add that position. That again will create another keyframe at 1 second. Just make sure you delete that. We don't need it. It will cause you issues. So the is active constraint, we just want to turn that off. And we'll copy that over. The gun hold, paste that in, and we'll make sure we turn that one on. Him again. Get rid of the extra controller so it's not in our way. And then same thing, add in, we set this up the exact same way we did before. So we'll say this is gun position, gun drop. We're just going to set these up as bools. They're simple, we just need on-offs for this. Go over to our effects layer. Copy paste our parameters in, make sure you set them as the proper thing in here, which in this case bools. And then, Bob Drunkle, same setup. Position, make sure you weight your layers up. So gun position, we're going to add in hip as our default state, and then hand as the one we'll toggle into. Transition over and back. This will be gun position equals true. That you're setting to however you like. False. Turn off your right defaults. And there's your gun change. And then make another layer. This will be for your drop. Make sure you weight it up. I know I say that for everything, but honestly it's one of the main culprits of things not working properly for you. Make gun holder default. Transition to gun drop. Turn off your rig defaults again. So that's your animator side. And then you just want to add your controls again. In this case, I'm going to do toggles just because it's easier. Feel free to set these up however you want, of course. What I was trying to spell there, but we're not going to pay attention to it. And we can upgrade that, or upload that and test it. Get that uploaded. You can see our gun is in our hip holster. Come in here, gun position, moves it over to our hand. And we have gun drop. Drops it in the world. Position, gun drop, will drop from there too. Alright, and that's about it for this. Couple things I want to point out, because you'll notice it here. You'll see in the mirror the gun is moving. Oh lord, is it moving? This is an ingrained issue into VRChat. Mirrors and cameras will always show constrained objects, no matter what they are, separate armature or separate things. They'll always have movement to them. They'll wiggle around on your avatar. They'll move around as world drops, whatever the case. You'll notice with the staff, it moves around a little bit, but it's not bad because it's a separate object. Things that you drop from your armature in mirrors and cameras will move around a lot. But I will say, that is not how other players will see it. Other players will see it the same way you do, sitting in the world, and they'll actually see even a little bit less jitter as long as they have, a decent connection. It is only in mirrors and cameras. It is not in world. So don't fret about that. Other thing I will say, if you run into it, it's a common issue with world drops. If you start running around in circles, and like moving around, and the objects in the world start moving around, sliding, in a direction off into nowheres, moving opposite of you or something like that, the likely culprits are your world target. That game object we made at the beginning is either not zeroed out, or your position and rotation constraints on your roots for the object weren't at their neutral position when you locked them in. Another culprit, of course, is you typed in the values wrong in those. But just double check everything. If you've locked in properly and put the values right, they should stay in the world. Yeah, other than that, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'll throw in some social links there that you guys can follow me on Twitter. You can ask questions there. I sometimes stream avatar work. That's a great place to grab me if you want help live. I don't do it all the time, but when I do, I'm always available, always willing to help. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope you learned something. And I hope you all get to litter your worlds with random objects. Have a good day. Peace.